The Bridge to Infinity. Harmonic 371244. My curiosity has no bounds. I have always wanted to know the answers to many things. I drove my parents mad with questions like what makes the wind blow, the grass grow, how does a seed know how to make a tree, a flower, or me? Do plants have intelligence? Do they feel pain, the heat, the cold, and the rain? Who made the universe, and what is eternity? Is God out there, or is he really a part of me and everything I see? Do we just live on earth, to die, and cease to be forever? Or do we have many lives and travel amongst the stars, constantly experiencing new things, without ever finding out how it all started or how it all will end? Is it our destiny to take a final voyage and cross the bridge to infinity? Bruce L. Cathy. Introduction. In my earlier books, I have stated that all the evidence pieced together over many years strongly suggests that modern-day scientists have discovered the secrets of anti-gravity, travel in space-time, which makes possible journeys to the most distant stars, the geometric structure of matter and antimatter, the tapping of energy from the Earth itself at almost no cost, transmutation of the elements, disintegration of matter by the use of laser or light beams. These can be made selective, almost instant communication between any number of points on the Earth's surfaces, through the Earth itself, and a myriad other technical wonders. All this is possible today. In one great surge of progress, the whole world could be transformed into a material wonderland with plenty for all. Now, several years later, my further researches have only helped to strengthen these statements. Small bits of information are beginning to leak out into the public domain, particularly that relating to laser research, but generally, the most advanced knowledge held by the scientists is not being released to be used for the welfare of the whole world community. There are many reasons for this, which are beyond the scope of this book, but I believe that a comparatively small international group is behind the suppression. They do not wish the knowledge to be made freely available because this would alter the concentration of power and allow the less fortunate countries to control their own affairs. I believe that this situation is slowly changing. The public are becoming aware that they are being conned and are starting to demand the truth. Modern communications are making it more difficult to suppress knowledge, and the subtle brainwashing techniques used to sway public opinion are not working as well as they did in the past. The younger generations, with their more idealistic outlook and superior knowledge, are beginning to take over control in the political and scientific fields, and hopefully they will learn wisdom as they progress and change the direction of world affairs from the hopeless future facing us today to a situation more worthy of the human race. I am optimistic they will succeed. Although the going will be rough at times, the only alternative is oblivion for all of us, and I am sure that this lesson is becoming more obvious as time goes by. This book is a mixture of updated material from my last 3 books and new information that will help strengthen the earlier theories that were presented in order to help explain the unified nature of a material and multidimensional universe. If a small percentage of my research can be verified as fact by future generations, then I will feel that my endeavors have been worthwhile. Bruce L. Cathy. Mathematics of the world grid. My interest in the increasing UFO activity in the New Zealand area led me to the discovery that the surface of the world was crisscrossed with an intricate network of energy grid lines. I began my research in 1965. The information in this chapter regarding the structure and mathematical values built into the system will consist of material condensed from my first 3 books, plus the findings derived from my recent research up to early 1982. In a general way, I was convinced that UFOs were actively engaged in a survey of the Earth for some definite reason. I felt that their visits were not haphazard. They were not just on casual sightseeing tours. Quite a number of investigators around the world had come to the conclusion that the sightings were beginning to form a pattern at this period. However, this pattern was so complex as to defy any definition or solution. By the correlation of sightings, small sections of track had been identified, and some saucers had been seen moving along these set paths. Some of these had hovered over certain spots at set intervals, but these bits and pieces of track lines were so scattered around the surface of our planet that it was quite impossible to fit them together into any semblance or order. I was certain that if an overall pattern could be found and plotted, it might be possible to establish the reason behind UFO activity. I considered that the pattern would be geometric if these things were intelligently controlled, and that if somehow I could find the key to one section, then I might solve the rest by duplication and inference. Blah. I had sighted a number of unidentified objects in the sky over a period of several years, and by correlating two of these with other data, I was eventually able to construct a grid system which covered the whole world. One of the sightings was in 1956. I was a DC-3 co-pilot crewing a flight from Auckland to Paraumu. It was about 6 p.m. Conditions were calm, and there was unlimited visibility. We were just south of Waverly at 7,000 feet when I saw this object at an increasingly high altitude in the east. I drew the captain's attention to it, and together we watched it travel to a curved trajectory from east to west across our track until it disappeared in a flash of light at about 10,000 feet in the area of D'Urville Island. It appeared to travel across New Zealand in the vicinity or slightly to the north of Cook Strait, and it was so large that two streaks similar to vapor trails were seen to extend from either side of its pale green disk. When about halfway across the strait, a small object detached itself from the parent body and dropped vertically until it disappeared. It looked almost as if the main disk was at such a high temperature that a globule had dripped from it. I thought about this later and decided that if that were so, the small object would also have a curved trajectory in the direction of the parent body. But this was not so. It detached and dropped vertically, down at great speed. There could be only one answer for this action. The small body must have been controlled. Calculations at a later date proved this UFO to have been between 1,500 to 2,000 feet in diameter. A report in a Nelson newspaper on the following day described an explosion at a high altitude to the north of the city. The shocking wave broke windows in some local glass houses. The other sighting occurred on 12 March 1965. This was the best and most interesting of them all, and from then my investigations were pressed on with all speed until they culminated in my present findings. I had always expected to see UFOs in the sky, and that was where my attention was usually focused. When I was flying, I was alert and ready to analyze any object sighted from the aircraft. I never expected to find a saucer landing at my feet, and so far this has never happened. The sighting, however, was different from all the others because I observed it lying under 30 feet of water. I was scheduled to carry out a positioning flight from Winnipeg, Auckland's main airport, at the time to Kaite. What the fuck that says? Whoops. Departure was at 11 a.m. and as no passengers were involved at the weather, and the weather was perfect, I decided to fly visually to Kaitea along the west coast. An officer from the operations department was on board, and this was a good opportunity to show him some of the rugged country to the north. I must stress that air traffic regulations were strictly observed during the flight. On leaving Winnipeg, I climbed to clear the area, and when approaching the southern end of the Kaipara Harbor, just north of Helensville, I dropped to a lower altitude to have a better look at anything in the flight path. The tide in the harbor was well out, and the water over the mudflats and estuaries was quite shallow. I suppose we were about a third of the way across the harbor when I spotted what I took to be a stranded gray-white whale. Ooh. I veered slightly to port to fly more directly over the object and to obtain a better look. I suppose a pilot develops the habit of keeping his emotions to himself. As far as I can remember, I gave no indication of surprise, and I said nothing as I looked down. My whale was definitely a metal fish. I could see it very clearly, and I quote from the notes I made later. A. The object was perfectly streamlined and symmetrical in shape. B. It had no external control surfaces or protrusions. C. It appeared metallic and there was a suggestion of a hatch on top, streamlined in shape. It was not quite halfway along the body as measured from the nose. D. It was resting on the bottom of the estuary and headed towards the south as it suggested from the streamlined shape. E. The shape was not that of a normal submarine and there was no superstructure. F. I estimated the length as 100 feet, with a diameter of 15 feet at the widest part. G. The object rested in no more than 30 feet of clear water. The bottom of the harbor was visible, and the craft was sharply defined. Inquiries made from the Navy confirmed that it would not have been possible for a normal submarine to be in this particular position due to the configuration of the harbor and coastline. An American scientist checked this spot on the harbor with a depth sounder in September 1969. He informed me afterwards that a hole had been detected in the harbor bed approximately 1/8 of a mile wide and over 100 feet deep, which I consider would indicate some activity had been carried out in this position some 5 years previously. I published the scientist report in my second book. I had a further key to the puzzle in April 1965. My wife saw an advertisement in the local paper seeking members for a UFO organization called New Zealand Scientific and Space Research. I contacted this organization and found that a vast amount of information had been very efficiently compiled. Material had been collected from 25 different countries over a period of 12 years. I was invited to study the information at leisure. Amongst this mass of data, I discovered the reports of a UFO that had been seen from several different localities in both islands of New Zealand on March 26, 1965. People in Napier, New Plymouth, Palmerston, North Wanganui, Fielding at Otaki Forks in the North Island, Nelson Coast Road, Blenheim, and Westport, Cape Foulwind in the South Island had all reported sightings. It was decided that I try to plot the track of this UFO. From the considerable amount of information available, I found that the maximum variation in the times of sightings from all areas was 15 minutes. Most reports gave the time as 9:45 p.m. This proved that the object must have been very large and at a high altitude during the greater part of its trajectory. There was nothing of any great significance or originality in these accounts, and they followed the pattern of many other sightings. However, from the mass of detail supplied by so many different people over so wide an area, it was possible to plot the track of the object with reasonable accuracy. I started work on a Mercator's plotting chart, and after several hours of checking one report against the other and calculating possible elevations and trajectories, I had felt I had refined the plot sufficiently to draw on the final track of the object or objects. The result is shown on map 1. The track began about 70 nautical miles north of New Plymouth, passed just over to the west of Mount Egmont, and finished at D'Urville Island. When first seen, the altitude would have been about 30,000 feet, curving down on a flight path to somewhere around 10,000 feet when it disappeared. Sometime after those sightings on 26th March 1965, I had another look at the plot I have made. I could find no flaws in my thinking, but I needed more information, as I was to discover many times later. The clues were quite obvious, but I was not then sufficiently expert in realizing their significance. In point of fact, this first track line was to be the starting point of a whole string of discoveries of which I have yet to find an end. I pored over that plot for a long time before it suddenly occurred to me that the track appeared to be in line with the position where I had sighted the unidentified submarine object, or USO, on 12 March 1965. On extending the line back, I found it was in line with the sightings of 26 March. I was positive there had to be a connection, but to prove it was a different matter. I checked my report files again and found that on 2 March, some fishermen just north of the coast of New Plymouth had seen a large object plunge into the sea and disappear. They thought it was an aircraft and reported the incident to the appropriate authorities, but no aircraft or personnel were missing. I checked this position on the map and found that it also fitted the established track line. Was this connected with the USO of 12 March, and could the two sightings be of the same object, sighted twice in 10 days? Could it be working slowly up this track, carrying out some project on the seabed? I tucked this thought away for future reference and carried on with the search. Map 1, showing section of the first track line discovered of World Grid System. This map was originally published in my first book, Harmonic 33, in 1968. The track line extends from the position of a USO sighted in Kaipara Harbor, Auckland, to a position at D'Urville Island, where two large UFOs were seen to disappear in a flash of light. It was some days later that I remembered the UFO I had seen in 1956. This object was similar, and most significant of all, both objects had apparently traveled at 90 degrees to each other, and finished in the same grand all-illuminating flash in the area of D'Urville Island. If these objects were not controlled, how could anyone explain such coincidences? No two meteors or other natural phenomena could coincidentally carry out similar maneuvers, travel at 90 degrees to each other, and both decide to end their existence at the same point in space, within 9 years of each other. Also, in both cases, objects had been seen to emerge from the parent bodies. Was this irrefutable evidence that they were intelligently controlled vehicles? I plotted the track of the 1956 UFO on the map at 90 degrees to the north-south line. I realized that I had no definite proof that they were at exactly 90 degrees to each other, or that the 1956 track was not a few miles north or south of this position. Still, I had to start from somewhere, and I would assume this to be correct unless and until other evidence proved me wrong. Two track lines at 90 degrees meant little on their own. If I found several at 90 degrees, I might have something. A grid, perhaps? These two lines hinted at this, and I believed that if I could solve the system of measurement, then I had two ready-made baselines to work from. Once again, I went to the UFO files and found that a Frenchman by the name of Amy Mitchell had been studying UFOs for a number of years and had found small sections of track lines in various areas of Europe. Saucers had been seen hovering at various points along these track lines, and Mr. Mitchell had observed that the average distance between these points was 54.43 kilometers. By itself, this was only a small grain of information, but like a starting gun, it set me off again. Using Kaipara Harbor as a starting point, I marked off the 54.43 kilometer intervals along the track line I had found. I was disappointed when I was unsuccessful in obtaining an even distribution of positions to the D'Urville Island disappearing point. I checked and rechecked, but nothing worked out. I slept on the problem, and at some time during the night, inspiration turned up the wick. Once more, the light grew bright. I remembered that a great number of sightings had occurred around Blenheim area, even before the advent of ordinary aircraft in New Zealand. This area had been visited by UFOs. I had read about them in old copies of the local papers, and many recent sightings suggested again that this area had something special about it. So I dragged out my map and extended the track line until it cut a 90-degree coordinate from the town of Blenheim. The distance from this point to the Kaipara position I found to be exactly 300 nautical miles, and 1 nautical mile is equal to 1 minute of arc on the Earth's surface. Could it be that the rough interval of 54.43 kilometers discovered by Mitchell was in fact an interval of 30 nautical miles when corrected? If so, then this interval could be evenly spaced along my track line 10 times. Was this the system of measurement used by the UFOs? There was no proof, of course, but it seemed a reasonable assumption. A minute of arc is a measurement which could be applied to the whole universe. University personnel and others in the academic field attacked me repeatedly over this issue. They maintained that degrees and minutes of arc were arbitrary values set up by the ancient mathematicians, and that, therefore, my calculations were meaningless. I finally found proof of my argument in the works of Pythagoras. As my research progressed, I discovered that the harmonic of the speed of light in free space had a value of 144. If this was divided by 2 to find the harmonic of 1/2 cycle or half wave, the answer was 72. If this value was then applied to the Pythagoras right-angled 3-4-5 triangle and each side was extended in this ratio, then the figure had sides of 216, 288, and 360 units. The harmonic proportions thus derived were equal to 216 equals 21,600 equals the number of minutes of arc in a circle. 360 equals 360 equals the number of degrees in a circle. 288 equals 144 times 2 equals 2c, where c equals the speed of light harmonic. It appeared from this that the harmonic of light had a very definite relationship with the geometry of a circle, and that the early mathematicians were fully aware of the fact. This will become clearer as you read through this book. The fifth interval of 30 nautical miles from the Kaipara position coincided with the position off the coast of New Plymouth where the mysterious object had plunged into the sea. The plotted points of disappearance of the two large UFOs at D'Urville Island did not quite match up with the ninth interval, but this did not worry me unduly, as I expected that a small percentage of error must be expected in my original plot. I readjusted the position to the ninth interval and carried out on the search to see how many other sightings I could fit into this pattern. The results exceeded my expectations. I found that by using units of 30 minutes of arc latitude north-south, and 30 minutes of arc longitude east-west on my Mercator's map, a grid pattern was formed into which a great number of UFO reports could be fitted. Ooh, that's interesting. I eventually had a map with 16 stationary and 17 moving UFOs plotted on grid intersections and track lines. Having satisfied myself that my reasoning and plotting were not false, I considered that I had good proof that New Zealand, possibly other countries, and probably the whole world were being systematically covered by some type of grid system. In my first book, I demonstrated that the main grid pattern consisted of grid lines spaced at intervals of 30 minutes of arc, latitude, longitude. In my second book, I probably confused the issue a bit as I stated that the east-west grid lines were spaced at 24 minutes of arc. This was due to the spacing being measured in nautical miles or values in minutes of latitude. The actual length of a minute of longitude varies mathematically from 1 nautical mile at the equator to 0 at the north and south poles. The value of 30 minutes of arc in terms of longitude in the New Zealand area happened to be an average of 24 nautical miles, which can be confusing those readers who are not familiar with map scales. Reference to the grid structure will therefore be stated from now on in minute of arc values only, for latitude and longitude to minimize confusion. I subsequently discovered that the grid lattice could be further divided. It is now evident that the grid lines in the main system are spaced at intervals of 7.5 minutes of arc north-south and east-west. The importance of this will prove itself when compared with the rest of the calculations in this book. There are 21,600 minutes of arc in a circle, and when this is divided by 7.5 or 7.5, we get a value of 2,880. The great lattice, therefore, is tuned harmonically to twice the speed of light, 288, as will be shown in other sections. It appeared that I had found a section of geometric grid pattern in the New Zealand area. I now had to form some theory of construction of the whole world. I could then possibly fit the New Zealand section into it. By drawing a series of patterns on a small plastic ball, I finally found a system which could be used as a starting point for a global investigation. The basic pattern is shown in diagram 1. I was sure I was on the right track, but now I had to superimpose this pattern on the world globe. It was essential that I find a point position somewhere on the Earth upon which to orientate the geometrical pattern. I finally came up with an item of news that gave me a very important clue on how to proceed. On 29 August 1964, the American survey ship Eltonin was carrying out a sweep of the seabed off the coast of South America. Oh, really? South America? That's cool. 1964. Was Hitler still alive? A series of submarine photographs was being taken of the area by means of camera attached to a long cable. A surprise was in store when these photographs were developed. On one of the points in marvelous detail was an aerial type object sticking up from an otherwise featureless seabed. This object appeared to be metallic and perfectly symmetrical in construction. The array consisted of 6 main crossbars with small knob-like ends and a small crossbar at the top. Oh, that's crazy. Each cross looked to be set at angles of 15 degrees to the others, and the whole system stood about 2 feet in height, and the position where this object was found was given as latitude 59 degrees 08 south, longitude, and 105 degrees west, as this bit of ironmongery was situated at a depth of 13,500 feet. Ironmongery? What the 13,500 feet below the surface. I was certain that no human engineers had placed it there. Scientists may be able to descend to those depth on specially constructed bathyspheres. What? But I don't think they could work as deeply as that on a precision engineering problem. In view of my earlier sightings in the Cape Para harbor, I was willing to accept that the aerial type object had been placed there by an unidentified submarine object, or USO. Since this photo was taken there, has been a determined attempt by the scientific world to label this object as nothing more than a plant of some sort. A journalist friend and I managed to visit the Eltonin during one of its few visits to the New Zealand and when we discussed this object with some of the scientists on board, the comment was that it was classed as an artifact. This was before the great hush-up, but regardless of that, I believe that the mathematical proofs will show without doubt that the object is artificial and most probably an aerial of some sort. Aerial type object photographed by the survey ship Eltonin on 29 August 1964 while carrying out a sweep of the seabed off the coast of South America. Position given was latitude 59 degrees 08 south, longitude 105 degrees west. It's an antenna. Why does it look like California? It's not California. The show looks like it. The form of this aerial-like structure also fitted in with the general pattern of the grid as I had envisaged it on the plastic ball. The 6 main crossbars denoted the radiating points of 6 or 12 great circles which formed the main structure of the grid. I centered the grid on the position of the object found by the Eltonin and the 180-degree reciprocal of this in Russian Siberia. Lining the whole thing up with the section I had found in New Zealand, I found the system to be lined up very closely with the magnetic field of the Earth. The equator of the grid followed very closely the line of zero dip around the world. That is, the positions on the Earth's surface where a magnetic compass needle has only a horizontal and no vertical component. In my first 2 books, I discussed the methods I used to line up the system and calculate the first estimates of the grid pole positions and the major focal points of the grid similar to the Eltonin aerial placement. The reciprocal position of the Eltonin aerial is at latitude 59 degrees 08 north, longitude 75 degrees east in Siberia. I calculated the length of the diagonal of what I call, for simplicity, the polar grid square, and found it to be 5,091.168825 minutes of arc long. I plotted a track from the Siberian position through the North Geographic Pole and measured off this distance to locate another corner aerial of the polar square. Square is not technically the right word to use, as the four sides are formed by sections of small circles which are in different planes to each other. When the polar square areas are transferred from the surface of the Earth sphere onto a flat plane, such as a map, then a perfect square is formed with sides 3,600 minutes long and diagonals of 5,091.168825 minutes of arc. In my first two books, I stated in error that the sides of the polar squares were formed by sections of great circles, 3,600 minutes of arc long, instead of small circles. The great circle distance between these points is, in fact, 3,418.606915 minutes of arc, which is very confusing to any investigator attempting to reconstruct the grid. I apologize to my readers for this error, which was caused by my lack of access to calculators during my earlier research. In the grid pattern, there are actually two small circle segments and one great circle segment connecting each of these points, which form the polar squares. Each of the segments has a different path over the Earth, and some tricky calculating is necessary to ascertain the true length. Although I used the wrong term in my earlier publications, the actual calculations derived from the grid system are not altered in any way, and still stand the test of time. Over the last few years, I have slightly refined the values I demonstrated previously, derived from a mixture of practical and theoretical studies. I have now set up what I see as a completely theoretical system, discovered by working entirely by calculator. Time will prove how close my calculations are. I have no doubt that I and others will continue further to perfect the system as more facts come to light. Once I had established this first baseline, I found it quite easy to construct the main skeleton of the grid over the whole surface of the Earth. As my work progressed, I found that there were in fact two similar grids interlocked with each other. The poles of the grids were spaced at different distances from the North Geometric Pole, and this arrangement set up a series of geometric harmonics which were directly related to the speed of light, mass, and gravity. The interaction of the two grids created a harmonic resonance, which in turn formed a third resultant grid. After 10 years of work and correlating information, I have now calculated theoretical positions of the three grid poles in the northern hemisphere, which are very close to my original estimate. Reciprocal positions will give similar values for the southern hemisphere. Grid pole A equals latitude 72.4266 degrees / longitude 90 degrees west, 1054.4 minutes of arc from the North Pole. Grid pole B equals latitude 78.4266 degrees / longitude 105 degrees west, 694.4 minutes of arc from the North Pole. Resultant grid pole C equals latitude 75.6 degrees / longitude 97.5 degrees west, 864 minutes of arc from the North Pole. The diagonal of the polar square of 5,091.168825 units can be broken down into a series of values. 5,091.168824 divide 2 equals 2,545.584412. 2,545.584412 divided 7.5 equals 3.3941125. 3.3941125 squared equals 1152. 11.52 divided by 8 equals 1.44. Speed of light harmonic. 2,545.584412 squared equals 6,480,000. Reciprocal of 2,545.584412 equals 0.0392837. The harmonic value of 3928371 is of extreme importance as it has a direct relationship with the Earth's magnetic field. The harmonic 648 was also shown in my earlier books to have many interesting associations, in particular the harmonic table for temperature, the many other harmonic factors centered around the polar square, corner areal positions, form a series of complex mathematical associations, and this can be left for those who wish to carry out their own research. If I can show you how to construct the main bones of the grid, my part of the job will be complete. I have found it impossible so far to plot the fine grid structure of lines 7.5 minutes apart over the whole world because of the complexity of such an exercise. A full computer program would be necessary, and I do not have the finance required for such an undertaking. So far, I have confined myself to the New Zealand area, with the small section of finely spaced grid lines that I originally discovered. Over the years, I have been able to plot into this map a great many interesting facts which indicate activity by various scientific groups. This has helped me to gradually build up my own knowledge of the system. My nosiness has not gone unnoticed, as evidenced by the constant probing of interested parties endeavoring to find out the extent of my discoveries. I hope that in the near future the international combines involved in this advanced research will make known to the public the vast amount of scientific knowledge they have acquired. Possibly this will only happen if and when a world government has been set up to control the scientific wonders, which are now within our reach. Enough is known already to make most of our energy and transport systems obsolete, which may explain why the facts are being suppressed. I have been able to check activity in other parts of the world by applying harmonic calculation to certain positions of latitude and longitude. It is not necessary to use the grid structure and such for some types of calculations. Once the harmonic process is understood, eventually when the whole grid has been plotted, the work will be much easier. In my second book, I stated that the first glimmerings of how true space travel might be achieved came to me when I uncovered the clues that led me to the UFO grid, which laces about our globe. I was aware that my calculations were not precisely accurate in the strict mathematical sense, but I could see that the system was based on space-time geometrics, and at least there was the best possible support for this nonetheless than the theories of Einstein. Somewhere I knew the system contained a clue to the truth of the unified field which he had postulated. Permeates all of existence. I didn't know at the time this clue had already been found by scientists who were well ahead of me. I know now that they must have understood something of the grid system years ago. They knew that Einstein's ideas about the unified field were correct. What's more, for many years they had been carrying out full-scale research into the practical applications of the mathematical concept contained in that theory. We were told that Einstein died without completing his equations relating to the unified theory, but in more recent times it has been said that he did in fact complete his work, but that the concepts were so advanced that the full truth was not released. The only way to traverse the vast distances of space is to possess the means of manipulating or altering the very structure of space itself, altering the space-time geometric matrix, which to us provides the illusion of form and distance. The method of achieving this lies in the alteration of frequencies controlling the matter-antimatter cycles which govern our awareness, our perception of position in the space-time structure. Time itself is a geometric just as Einstein postulated. If time can be altered, then the whole universe is waiting for us to come and explore its nook and crannies. In the blink of an eye, we could cross colossal distances, for distance is an illusion. The only thing that keeps places apart in space is time. If it were possible to move from one position to another in space in an infinitely small amount of time, or zero time, then both the positions would coexist, according to our awareness. By speeding up the geometric of time, we will be able to bring distant places within close proximity. This is the secret of the UFOs. They travel by means of altering the spatial dimensions around them and repositioning in space-time. I decided to concentrate specifically on three harmonic values which appeared to have a close relationship with each other. Previously, I had shown this connection and had truthfully pointed out that I did not know why the relationship was there at all. The harmonic values which occupied my full attention 1703. This was the four-figure harmonic of 170 No, that looks like 170 billion 300 million, which is the expression in cubic minutes of arc of the mass or volume of the planet Earth and its surrounding atmosphere. 1439, a four-figure harmonic of 143, okay, let's see, 143,900 minutes of arc per grid second, representing the speed of light in grid values. 2,640. This figure expresses in minute of arc values is built into the polar portion of the grid structure as a geometric coordinate. I found that when I matched these values harmonically, the results were as follows. Zeros to the right-hand side can be ignored in this form of harmonic calculation. 1703 subtract 264 gives you 1439. In other words, the difference between the harmonic of mass and the harmonic of light was the harmonic of 264, or 2,640. It was apparent that if my calculations were more accurately worked out, it should be possible to find out just what 2,640 figure referred to. After more calculation, the following terms were found. 17,025 Earth mass harmonic. Subtract 2,636 unknown harmonic gives you 14,389 speed of light harmonic. Checking through some five-figure mathematical tables, I found to my surprise that 2.6363 is the square root of 6.95 from the 1 to 10 square root tables, and the harmonic calculation decimal points as well as zeros to the right or left of a figure can be ignored, so it could be said that the square root of 695 was 2636. I could perceive from this the first steps necessary to solve the elusive equation. I had established that 695 was the harmonic reciprocal of the speed of light, or 1,439 subject to the accuracy of my calculations at the time. It was now possible to substitute algebraic values, although obviously a computer would be necessary to solve the true values to extreme accuracy. 17,025 Earth mass, 2,636 square root of subtract 2,636 square root of speed of light, reciprocal. 14 equals 14,389 speed of light. If c equals the speed of light and m equals mass, then m equals c plus the square root of 1 over c. I had the first part of a unified field equation in harmonic values. To take the next step, I first had to go back to Einsteinian theory, particularly the famous equation E equals mc squared, where E is energy, m is mass, and c is the speed of light. Einstein declared that physical matter was nothing more than a concentrated field of force. What we term a physical substance is in reality an intangible concentration of waveforms. Different combinations of structural patterns of waves unite to form the myriad chemicals and elements which in turn react with one another to form physical substances. Different waveforms of matter appear to us to be solid because we are constituted of similar waveforms which resonate within a clearly defined range of frequencies and which control the physical processes of our limited world. Einstein believed that m, the value for mass in the equation, could eventually be removed and a value substituted that would express the physical in the form of pure energy. In other words, by substituting for m, a unified field equation should result which would express in mathematical terms the whole of existence, including this universe and everything within it. Einstein maintained that the m in his equation could be replaced by a term denoting waveform. I had found a substitute for m in terms of waveforms of light, so the obvious step to me was to replace Einstein's m with the values of c found from the grid system. The results are as follows. Einstein, E equals mc squared. Kathy grid, m equals c plus the square root of 1 over c. Therefore, E equals c plus the square root of 1 divided by c squared. Harmonic equation 1. I now had a harmonic unified field equation expressed in terms of light, or pure electromagnetic waveform. The key to the universe, the whole of existence, to the seen and the unseen, to forms, solids, liquids, and gases, the stars and the blackness of space itself, all consisting of visible and invisible waves of light. All of creation is light. It was now necessary to refine my calculations and attempt to discover a way to practically apply this initial equation. The equation is that from which an atomic bomb is developed by setting up derivatives of the equation in geometric form. The relative motions of the waveforms inherent in matter are zeroed and convert from material substance back to pure energy. This explained the workings of a nuclear explosive device, but it still did not yield the secret of space-time propulsion, the grid system which I discovered by the study of the movement of unidentified flying objects was harmonically tuned to this basic equation, yet a UFO does not disintegrate when it moves within the resonating fields of the network. There had been an extension of the equation which so far I had missed that would produce the necessary harmonics for movement in space-time. In the polar areas of the grid, the geometric values of some of the coordinates appeared to be doubled up. The coordinate of 25, 45, 58, 44, 12 was doubled in the diagonals of the polar squares, with all of its associated harmonics, and other factors appeared to be doubled when the pattern was projected into a flat plane. I reasoned that a way to check this idea was to increase the values of C in the equation and observed the changing harmonic of E to see what relative values might emerge. I thought at the time that a direct anti-gravitational harmonic might become evident, but my recent research has proved this line of thought to be incorrect. In terms of mathematical values, I found what I was hunting for in the form of two more equations. In the case of one of the equations, I erroneously believed that the derived harmonic value related to the reciprocal of gravity. I know now that what I had hold of was an equation related to the magnetic field of the Earth. The Earth being simply a huge magnet, a dynamo wound with magnetic lines of force as it coils, telescopically counted to be 1,257 to the square centimeter in one direction and 1,850 to the square centimeter in the other direction, eddy currents. Indicates that natural law has placed these lines as close together as the hairs on one's head. The spectroscope shows that there is an enormous magnetic field around the sun, and it is the present conclusion of the best minds that magnetic lines of force from the sun envelope this earth and extend to the moon, and that everything, no matter what its form on this planet, exists by reason of magnetic lines of force. This I agree with. According to my own research, we are taught in our schools and universities that the magnetic field passes through one magnetic pole, then through the body, and out the other magnetic pole. I disagree with this explanation. I believe that magnetic lines of force enter the body at the poles, then carry out a looped path through the body before passing out the opposite poles. The flow is not in one pole and out the other, but in both poles and out both poles, although the field intensity both ways is unbalanced. If we can visualize one line of force so that we can trace out its path, we can form an analogy by imagining it to be similar to a piece of string. First of all, we make a loop in the piece of string, and now imagine it being fed through a fixed position, with the loop remaining stationary relative to a fixed point. With the length of string as the axis, we can now make the loop revolve in a path which is at 90 degrees to the movement of the string. The loop, in fact, would trace out a spherical shaped form in space. The lines of force of the magnetic field would form a lattice or grid pattern due to the spin of the planetary body. A good analogy would be an ordinary machine-wound ball of string. The length of string has taken on the form of this as a physical body being formed in space. Then we can now imagine a small vortex being created at all the trillions of points where the lines of force cross each other in the lattice pattern. Each vortex would manifest as an atomic structure and create within itself what we term a gravitational field. God. The gravitational field, in other words, is nothing more than the effect of relative motion in space. Matter is drawn towards a gravitational field, just as a piece of wood floating on water is drawn towards a whirlpool. The gravitational fields created by the vortexual action of every atom would combine to form the field of the completed planetary body. The world grid that I speak of is the natural grid that is formed by the lattice pattern of the interlocking lines of force. The unbalanced field of 1,257 lines of force per square centimeter in one direction and 1,850 in other does not tell us very much in itself, but if we use the information to calculate the field strength over an area which has a harmonic relationship with the unified fields of space, and if the basic information is correct, we should find some mathematical values of great importance. At the time of writing my last book, I was not aware of the extreme importance of the values at that stage of accuracy. I was close enough to see how they fitted into the equations, but a further fine-tuning was necessary to reveal the knowledge locked within these two simple numbers. The basic unit for harmonic calculation is the geodetic inch. For 1/72 thousandth of a meter of arc, 1 minute of arc being 6,000 geodetic feet. If we take the values of 1257 and 1850 lines of force per square centimeter and calculate the field strength for 1 square geodetic inch, the field density is 8,326.71764 and 12,255.08864 lines of force respectively. The fields being in opposition to each other. The combined field density is equal to 20,581.80628, allowing for very slight variations in the conversion factors. The difference in field strengths, 12,255.08864 minus 8,326.71764 is equal to 3,928.371. We could say that this resultant field density one way is equivalent to field A minus field B, or 3,928.371 lines of force. This value I found to be the harmonic reciprocal of the grid coordinate 2545.584412. The combined field strength of 20,581.80628 lines of force can be harmonically associated with several other interesting facts to be demonstrated in other sections of this book. We can now formulate another equation in order to demonstrate the association of the Earth's magnetic field with the speed of light. Harmonic equation 2.